समझ नहीं आ रहा अपने सैलरी इंक्रीमेंट का क्या करूं।
बेटा इतना क्या सोच रहा है? अपने म्यूचुअल फंड्स के एसआईपी का टॉप अप करा ले। दिस इज द राइट टाइम।
क्या समझ में नहीं आया?
बेटा इतना क्या सोच रहा है? अपने म्यूचुअल फंड्स का एसआईपी टॉपअप करा ले। दिस इज द राइट टाइम।
अब समझा।
Mutual fund investments are subject to market risks. Read all scheme related documents carefully.
3,000 people, perhaps more, had fled east across the burning hills, escaping the freedom that had descended upon them. Teenage boys from the village of Soon Patochi, as leaders of the All Jammu and Kashmir Muslim Conference, recorded in an official complaint, had been, I quote, subjected to unnatural vices by the Punjab police. The women were, again I quote, not only raped, but in some cases, their breasts and secret parts have been bitten. Quote close. Elders and notables, soon to be Prime Minister Sardar Abdul Qayyum wrote, were flogged, then marched through Palandri Bazaar tied with rope. Some of them were ordered to bark like dogs, Qayyum wrote. The others were compelled to mew like cats. Hi, and welcome to this episode of the Print Security Code. I'm going to be looking at the protests still unfolding in Pakistan-occupied Kashmir. For more than 8 weeks, the very villages and towns torn apart by the brutal violence of 1955 have been under attack yet again. 87 people, journalist Haris Qadir has reported, have been shot dead by central and provincial police since protests broke out seeking democratic reforms and control over economic resources. The group spearheading the protests, which is called the Jammu and Kashmir Joint Awami Action Committee, or JAAC, has been declared a terrorist group by Pakistan's government. We know a lot about what happens in Jammu and Kashmir, the part of the state that India exercises control over. But there's a whole separate story playing out in Pakistan-occupied Kashmir, which is what Pakistan calls Azad Kashmir. It's not paid enough attention to, but the story is entwined and compelling. Ever since 1951, the same year Jammu and Kashmir held its first democratic elections, leaders who had fought to join Pakistan found themselves at war with the new nation they had embraced. The peoples of Poonch in Azad Kashmir, who had begun the rebellion against Maharaja Hari Singh's government and his decision to accede to India, found themselves as vassals of a new master, as brutal as the hated ruler they had rebelled against. 5 years before the savage violence at Soon Patochi, cheering villagers and brass bands had gathered at Rawalpindi railway station to greet the Lashkars or militia who had murdered and raped their way to the gates of Srinagar before they were beaten back by the Indian army. These holy warriors would, a British diplomat recorded, and I quote, acknowledge the honours paid them by merry feux de joie, that is, by firing their guns in the air. Then the guns of the liberators were turned to point at the people they had just liberated. Even though the Azad Kashmir protests have been cast as a rebellion against Islamabad's authority, they actually began as a very simple assertion of citizenship. In 2024, the JAAC, formed from a loose coalition not of radical politicians, but traders, lawyers, students, and civil society groups, which were seeking the restoration of grain and electricity subsidies as severe inflation roiled Pakistan. The protesters based their demands on the fact that the territory had long been denied royalties on the Mangla Dam, which is one of the biggest dams in the region and definitely the heart of Pakistan's economy. These revenues were denied to them on the grounds that Pakistan does not consider the part of Kashmir it occupies, that is called Azad Kashmir. It says this is not a province of Pakistan. Later, royalties were granted to the province by military ruler General Parvez Musharraf in 2002, but they were lower than the same royalties paid to Pakistan's 4 proper provinces. The protests of 2024 were met with lethal force by police. One police officer was also killed in the awful violence that followed. The protests, though, soon moved to wider issues of democratic representation and accountability. Among the core issues were 12 seats which are reserved in the so-called Azad Kashmir Provincial Assembly for descendants of residents of Jammu and Kashmir who migrated to Pakistan after 1947. These descendants are distributed obviously across Pakistan's 4 provinces, and their seats have been a tool for allowing Islamabad to impose its will on Azad Kashmir, since those elections are fought outside the province of Azad Kashmir. Little understood in India, this issue actually goes back to 1947. Long before ethnic Pashtun irregulars or the Pakistan army invaded Kashmir, Poonch had rebelled against Maharaja Hari Singh's rule. The reasons were many, but they included resentment against the diminution of Poonch's regional autonomy. The ruler of Poonch, Raja Jagatdev Singh, a Hindu, had been reduced to a vassal of Maharaja Hari Singh in 1936. This opened the way for the court in Srinagar to impose extortionate taxes on Poonch's people. One observer at the time wryly noted there were taxes for, I quote, a widow's tax, a tax on every wife after the first, and a tax on sheep and goats. These resentments worsened by the lack of representation given to Muslims in the Jammu Kashmir military, which was of course then a semi-independent princely state, and in Jammu and Kashmir's government service. Local leaders like Muhammad Ibrahim Khan, a London-educated lawyer and the rival of Sheikh Muhammad Abdullah in the National Conference, as well as a key leader of the powerful Sudhan clan, seized on the chaos which erupted in the build-up to independence. Ibrahim Khan worked with the Pakistani military officer Major General Akbar Khan, who was then planning a bid to seize Kashmir by force. Ibrahim Khan made volunteers available from the large pool of demobilized British Indian Army, that is, people working for the colonial army, and Indian National Army officers from Poonch. So you had officers both serving in the British Army and with Netaji Subhash Chandra Bose. He got them to join in. Ibrahim Khan's key rival, Abdul Qayyum Khan, meanwhile, launched a low-grade insurgency separately against the Maharaja's forces. Kashmir's armed forces responded to reprisals against local Muslims in a very brutal way, which fueled conflict. This conflict escalated with tragic consequences. Kashmir state forces, allying with the private armies of Sikh princes in Punjab, initiated a campaign of ethnic cleansing in the Hindu-majority belt south of the Chenab River. In essence, the Dogra kingdom thought it would at least hang on to those territories where its religious kinsmen were in a majority, even if Pakistan ended up seizing everything to the north of the river. To the Poonch rebels, the war of 1947-1948 was a victory. Even if Pakistan had failed to seize the Kashmir Valley as well as much of Jammu, Ibrahim Khan now ran a de facto independent government in the lands of the Sudhan clan. The federal government in Karachi, though, had other plans of its own. The supreme leader of the Muslim Conference, Chaudhry Ghulam Abbas, closely tied to Pakistan's ruling elite and seeking the greater integration with Pakistan, fled from India in 1949. He was promptly handed power in Azad Kashmir. Ibrahim Khan, who was well embedded in clan politics that prevailed west of what is now called the line of control, responded with outright insurrection. He refused to acknowledge this imposition by Karachi, which we today say Islamabad for, and ran his own parallel government. Late in 1949, Indian military intelligence reports seen by ThePrint recorded that the interim government ruling Azad Kashmir, that is, the Karachi-backed government, had disintegrated in the Sudhan lands, and that Kashmiri Muslims who had migrated to Pakistan were also disillusioned by the less than warm welcoming they were getting from the Sudhans. After all, the Sudhans wanted autonomy for Poonch. They didn't really care too much about migrants coming from the Kashmir Valley. The death of Pakistan's founding Governor General and the patriarch of the Pakistan movement, Muhammad Ali Jinnah, and the assassination of Prime Minister Liaquat Ali Khan interrupted this crisis. It kind of forced both factions to arrive at a ceasefire because they realized that in this chaos, they'd somehow have to get along. The centralization of authority, though, however, continued. The rules of business for the Azad Jammu Kashmir government were rewritten in 1952, handing all power to the bureaucrat M.A. Gurmani, Gurmani, by the way, was a dyed-in-the-wool bureaucrat in the princely states tradition, so who'd been appointed by Pakistan. For more than 17 months, the Sudan rebels fought the combined forces of the Punjab police, the Pakistani Punjab police, and the Murray-headquartered 12th Brigade of the Pakistan Army. The army and the constabulary were brutal in their methods, the writer Usman Khan Yusufzai has recorded. Entire villages were burnt, and many of those who showed sympathy for the rebels were killed on the spot. Others were prosecuted with little to no trial. An entire new legislation called the Palandri Disturbances Tribunal Act was put in place and gave the state the power to conduct trials with very special and, in my non-legal opinion, very strange rules. For example, it allowed written evidence from persons who were absent or even dead. So basically, a police officer could write anything on a piece of paper and say some dead person had said this, and it would have to be accepted. It also denied convicts, individuals convicted, the right to appeal to a higher court. General Ayub Khan's military coup in 1958 led to the crushing of the democratic impulse in Pakistan-occupied Kashmir, just as it did in the 4 provinces proper. The rebellion of 1955 was not Azad Kashmir's last effort to escape from its subordination to Pakistan. Following the tragic drowning of 50 members of a wedding procession in 1973, the sociologist Roger Ballard has recorded, villagers stormed the offices of the local magistrate and police. And what did they do when they stormed it? They flew the Indian national flag, the Tiranga, as a gesture of protest. Eventually, elite Pakistani troops were parachuted into the town of Dadyal to free the government. The introduction of Islamist organizations like the Hizbul Mujahideen, Lashkar-e-Taiba and the Jaish-e-Mohammed by the ISI, the Inter-Services Intelligence Directorate, after 1990 was partly, of course, to fight India, but it was partly also to make sure there was an armed militia in the region that could stamp out any uppity Kashmiris demanding the same freedom and rights that Pakistan wanted people on the other side of the line of control to get. Faced with an explosion of anger in Azad Kashmir now, the journalist Ariba Fatima writes, establishment politicians and the military seem to have decided they're not willing to consider dialogue and only want to escalate repression. Khwaja Asif, Pakistan's defense minister, has ruled out any negotiations. He said, I put them in the same category as India and consider them as enemies of Pakistan. It's ironic he's saying that, of course, because his own political party has been called that by various military figures in the past. The Pakistani military believes that it will be able to crush this rebellion. Perhaps it will. But it's clear from the past that even the most extreme state terrorism won't extinguish the rage of people condemned to incomplete citizenship in the name of their own freedom. I'm Praveen Swami, and I'm a contributing editor to ThePrint. Thank you for watching this episode of Security Code.